Welcome to Let's Talk About the Deep Stuff. I'm your host, Sean Kneese. And on this show, I have monologues or conversations about the big, heavy topics in the world. And I'm going to get into some deep shit today about just a lot of the hateful shit I've been seeing. And I know I don't usually get political on the show. Sometimes I do. I'm careful when I talk about politics because I like to make sure that I represent myself accurately, because there's a lot of nuance to things, and people will put you in a box you're not in if you say one thing. But to me, this is beyond politics. A lot of the stuff I want to say. This is a matter of values, not just like politics. This is a matter of human dignity and human decency and just all the hate and I see. And I'm going to go into different specifics about it and how I think we can get, what I think the cause of it is and how we can get beyond it, and just also my off-the-cuff thoughts about it. I originally was going to do a whole researched and show and about different times throughout history that people have been manipulated by propaganda to believe certain things, or how there's always an us and a them. And I may go into some of that in today's episode, but I just want to speak from the heart, because this is something I really feel in my heart, everything I'm going to talk about today. And it's not out of virtue signaling or trying to put myself as better or whatever. It's just something I deeply feel that I want to say. It's just things that I want to express. I just feel like I don't want to be fucking agreeable anymore and just not say what I feel. And if people can't handle that, then that's their problem. So I just don't care anymore about what kind of backlash I face for what I say if I'm speaking my truth. So, to me, it's one thing if you want to disagree about policy, or even if you say, you want to have a process for how people come in here and we have to help our own first and all that. I don't think you're necessarily a terrible person for saying or thinking that, or having different views on policy. And I know some people say we can't have any disagreements besides pineapple on pizza. Or does that mean we can have different views about food toppings, not about human rights? But I have a more nuanced take of that. I know a lot of people are just either pineapple on pizza or because I think we can disagree about more things than just pineapple on pizza. I think we could talk about I believe in universal health care, but I'm willing, if I know most people don't want everybody to just die of no health care. So other people might just have different solutions to that. I'm not against people talking about certain checks and balances to come live in the country or whatever. Or not, if somebody committed a violent crime or they're a dangerous person, having them be tried in their own country or be tried here, that I'm fine with. But what I'm about to speak about is more from a human rights perspective, civil liberties perspective. And the Fifth Amendment in the Constitution says no person shall be denied life, liberty, or property without due process of law. It does not say no citizen. And it does not say that the person has to be in the country legally. It doesn't say any of that. It just says no person should be denied that. I like to think about what's moral and not just what's legal. From just an ethical standpoint, regardless of if it's written in a document or it's written into law, human beings are human beings, and I think there are natural rights to human beings. I don't think that anybody should just be detained or tortured or go through any kind of human rights abuse regardless of their status. And I don't think I believe in freedom of speech as a natural right. I don't care whether a law, I think everybody should be able to have a free. I mean, if we were going by the law, we'd say, people in Iran, they don't have the right to speak out there because they don't have a First Amendment. No, I believe in their free speech. I don't give a shit what's written into a law. the laws to protect that, but I believe in natural rights. Because people are human beings and they deserve to be treated as such. But this isn't just affecting undocumented immigrants. This is affecting legal immigrants and U.S. citizens. And Trump's even talking about putting homegrown criminals into these detention centers, which is unconstitutional. Even if someone's the worst criminal in the world, even if they're a serial killer, if you take away their right to free trial, that's getting rid of one of the fundamental principles of this country, which is right to due process and right to a trial. Otherwise, what are we? We're a dictatorship. But this isn't just affecting people with crimes, because ICE is detaining people who haven't committed any crimes. Who they kidnap people and put them in an unmarked car. I mean, that one student, she was just detained and put in an unmarked car for writing an article criticizing Israel's policies, like in the Middle East. You know, I don't care that she wasn't a citizen. I think you should be allowed to criticize that. Criticizing the actions of a foreign government, like, it's not something that should be prosecuted. That's freedom of speech. You know, saying it'd be one thing if, like, you came here and, like, you were planning some kind of violent thing or something like that, but that wasn't what this person was doing. And also, since they don't have to identify themselves, there's people impersonating ICE officers and sexually assaulting immigrant women or even non-immigrant women that are just Latina. Or I'm going to post an article to that's been happening, and that's fucked up and that's not right. And I don't like a secret police going around wearing masks, kidnapping people and putting them in a secret prison where nobody knows where they are. Like, what the hell is that? This is like what I saw. Like, this is like the movie V for Vendetta, the kind of shit they were doing. You know that. I mean, and so many others, like, not, you know, any other kind of dystopian story you can think of. That was just the first one that came to mind. But especially when Trump is saying, like, we need to get rid of that he wants to start putting U.S. citizens in there, and now with Alcatraz, this new prison in Florida, he's joking about feeding the prisoners to fucking alligators. Even if, like, you put the most horrible person in the world there, like, what kind of sick shit is that? Like, we're gonna, you know, joking, they're gonna run from alligators. Like, this isn't little cutesy stuff. This is sick and evil. Here's what really horrifies me, and I'm this is the main thing I want to get into, because I want to get into just the dangers of dehumanizing propaganda and scapegoating, and because, like, you know, you got people defending Trump's immigration policy, saying, "Oh, he's just going after illegals, he's just targeting criminals." And they don't necessarily support, like, locking everybody away, like, or denaturalizing, you know, people who haven't committed crimes. They're not for just, like, going after all Latinos or all, you know, there's plenty of people that just want security about, like, knowing who's here and they you know, that kind of thing. But there is people like Laura Loomer who were saying shit like, this was her tweet. She said, feeding illegals to the gators, we need more of this energy. Talking about the new prison that Trump made, the Alcatraz in Florida. She said, feeding illegals to the gators, we need more of this energy. And then following it up by saying the gators would be guaranteed 65 million meals. 65 million. There are not 65 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S. There are 65 million Latinos. She was literally talking about genocide of Latinos. And this is not a fringe person that you can just discredit. This is somebody who has connection to Donald Trump, the most powerful man in the White House. So I don't think it's to just dismiss her as fringe or extreme. Like, this is very concerning to me. She has direct access to Trump. She's attended Oval Office meetings. accompanied him on flights despite holding no official role. And her presence was significant enough to prompt NSC staff shakeups, with Trump reportedly firing several officials after Loomer suggested they lacked loyalty. And Trump has also publicly praised her. He's referred to Loomer as a very important person politically. He's praised her courage, amplified her posts on his platforms like Truth Social over 20 times since 2023. He retweeted and echoed her content, even praising her for criticizing his critics. And reports indicate that Trump once considered hiring Loomer for an official campaign role, something blocked by senior advisors. So, this isn't... Like, it's easy to say, okay, that's just one person who said this fringe thing, but when she has this kind of close connection to the president, like, this is a hateful bigot. If you're a disgusting bigot and you're calling for genocide, like, by people being fed to alligators, you're a fucking piece of shit. I don't care. Like, that's the thing. Like, I don't judge by people by anything that they're born as. Their race, their gender, their culture that they're born into. I'm against, like, I don't judge anybody based on that stuff. I judge people based on who they choose to be. And she's choosing to be a shitty human being. That goes beyond a difference in political opinion. That makes her a disgusting human being. And you could throw around whataboutisms and say, oh, well, someone on the left said this or that. But let's be real. Right now, the left isn't in power. They're not running the government. What Laura Loomer says matters because she has the ear of the most powerful man in the world. She's been in private meetings with Trump. She's flown on his plane. She's reposted his shit. This isn't fringe anymore. This is shaping policy. And then on top of that, you got Ann Coulter tweeting, we didn't kill enough Indians. That was in response, this wasn't related to immigration, but it was about something, a college student, basically a Native American expressing an opinion she didn't like. And she's talking about we didn't kill enough Indians. And this hate has just been normalized in some corners of the right. And again, I'm focusing on the right. I know the left has its issues, but the right is the one with the most power now, and they're the ones dictating policy. So that's why I'm focusing on them. U.S. citizens are being detained by ICE. People like Leonardo Garcia Venegas, born here, locked up because he looked foreign. Legal immigrants, TPS holders, DACA recipients, mothers going to their green card appointments and getting disappeared, asylum seekers being fast-tracked out of the country with no hearing. This isn't just about who crossed the border. This is a whole system being used to dehumanize and terrorize people based on how they look, where they're from, or what language they speak. Let me mention another case in LA. It's of Andrea Velez, 32-year-old in LA. U.S. citizen. She's a U.S. citizen. You know, she's just brown and Latina. You know, I feel like some people don't know this, but there's, not everybody who's brown or Latino, or like there's people who were born in the U.S. or whose families have been here a couple generations that look like that. I don't mean, California used to be a part of Mexico, so does Texas. Like, but these ICE people weren't even asked to identify themselves. Like, they didn't identify themselves. They refused to identify themselves. They wore masks, and they approached her just because of how she looked. They didn't ask for her papers, and they detained her. And then she resisted because, like, she didn't know who these people were in masks grabbing her. She didn't know they were, like, what they were, like, they were government agents. And then they threw her to the ground, this little woman, and she had bruises all over her. And she was just going to work, a U.S. citizen. And meanwhile, there's illegal immigrants from Canada, from Europe, from Ireland. They aren't going after those people. But they're going after citizens who look foreign, who don't look like, the system itself is targeting, is discriminatory and wrong. And I think that these things are allowed to happen slowly with the right propaganda and the right framing. And now we are where we are, and it's getting even worse. especially when you have J.D. Vance saying some Americans are more American than others. I don't know if any of you have read Animal Farm. That was one of the lines in the book. Animal Farm was one of George Orwell's books. I feel like it's not talked about quite as often as 1984, but Animal Farm was a much shorter book. And it was these animals on the farm who were oppressed by this farmer, and then eventually they overthrow the farmer, but then when they take over, they start oppressing people just like the farmer did. They do it to the other animals. They say, well, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. And that's bullshit. America's never been all white, especially like Texas or California. Like, I don't know. And what does it matter? Like, we're all human beings, man. I don't like the direction this is going in, to start treating certain people as less than. That being said, there have been white people targeted too by this, and European immigrants, but for different reasons. There was a Norwegian tourist, 21-year-old tourist from Norway, denied entry to the U.S. because I'm not sure if this has been verified. I like to make sure whatever I'm reading is true. But he had a camera on his camera roll. He had a picture mocking J.D. Vance, and he was denied entry because of that. And he was taken to a room with several armed guards where he had to hand over his shoes, mobile, and backpack, where he had a meme of J.D. Vance on his phone. And, imagine if a U.S. citizen went to Russia and was detained by the Russian government for having a picture making fun of Vladimir Putin. And we probably think he was pretty fucking stupid to go to Russia and do that, but we wouldn't be justifying it. We'd be like, well, Putin's a dictator. Because I always thought we could make, we had the freedom to do that. We could make fun of J.D. Vance, have a meme of him with a bald head looking like a bit, and he's going after on top of that, Trump is going after PBS and other news networks that have attacked him in the past. And sure, you could say it, and I know his supporters would be like, well, they lied about this and that, but every political candidate or president has had the media say this or that about him. I would argue that a lot of their criticisms of Trump are true. Not that, I trust everything that the other news networks say or whatever, but I always like to be skeptical about everything. But, he's the president. We're allowed to criticize, Bernie Sanders had the media slander and attack him, CNN and all those networks, the same ones that Trump is going after. Bernie Sanders, while he was running in the primaries, had those same networks slander him, and try to vilify him, and they made up all kinds of shit about him. And he wasn't looking to sue them or shut them down because he doesn't believe in censoring people who disagree with him. He's not a tyrant. Whatever else you want to say about Bernie Sanders, and whatever you disagree with him on. At least, that's... I don't know. I just feel like his cult is gonna... there's certain people who are just gonna fucking defend Trump no matter what. So, I'm not expecting to change minds. I'm just expressing my view. And, this is my platform, contrary to what a lot of people think. You don't have to put every single view on your show. People can go listen to pro-Trump outlets. There's other places where they can get the different perspectives. I'm just giving my perspective. And this isn't primarily a political show. I just thought there was a lot going on that I didn't want to be silent on. And when you have Trump talking about the enemy within, when ICE doesn't even ask people for their papers, and you're sending them to prisons without due process, like Alligator Alcatraz. From when I looked into it, I know that there's there's no like there's hurricane weather around there. It's likely like the people, since I think they're in outside tents, they could be eaten by alligators. They could be killed by the weather, the flooding. But what happens, like, he's talking about the enemy within, and he's talking about homegrown people that he wants to deport to El Salvador prisons. What happens if he just, what's to stop him from just saying, okay, anybody who criticizes Trump or I think is against me, I'm going to send ICE after them? Because I could just say, they're not a citizen. I could just say they're a criminal. I could say they're a homegrown threat. And I'm going to put them in a secret prison. Because, they don't have to identify themselves. They don't have to have a hearing. They don't have to ask for an ID. They could just take them in an unmarked car and send them wherever. I just, and people, I'm sure some of his supporters would be like, oh, you're just looking at the mainstream media. I'm not looking at the mainstream media. I'm just looking at what I see. I'm not someone who, I was hoping I was wrong. I was hoping the left was wrong. I was hoping liberals were wrong. I was hoping that maybe Trump wasn't as bad as people were going to say, and he was just going to do this and that, but he's worse. And this isn't me hating America or hating my country. This is me using my right to free speech to speak out against my government and what it's doing. And that's the point of free speech, is to be able to dissent. Thomas Jefferson said dissent is the highest form of patriotism. That's what they didn't want kings in this country when they founded it. They didn't want, that's the point of free speech. It's not just to give your view on the weather. It's to be able to criticize your government, criticize policies, because you want to make it better, not because you hate, this whole idea like, oh, if you don't like America, get out. Well, no, I think if you see flaws in your country, you don't just get out. You try to make it better, and you speak out. Just as I was working on this episode, Donald Trump said to Rosie O'Donnell on Twitter, he said we should remove her citizenship. He said, because of the fact that Rosie O'Donnell is not in the best interest of our great country, I'm giving serious consideration to taking away her citizenship. She is a threat to humanity and should remain in the wonderful country of Ireland if they want her. God bless America. So, anybody that disagrees with him or has a different view of his vision of America, which is a pretty shitty one if you ask me, an exclusive, discriminatory, fascist vision that's anybody who wants a different America than that, he can just revoke their fucking citizenship and send them to Alligator Alcatraz to be eaten by alligators, or sent to some other secret prison, or revoke the citizenship. This is exactly what I was talking about. Voltaire said, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And he was a key figure of the Enlightenment. He was Voltaire, who was one of the ones who inspired the founding fathers who wrote the Constitution. That was their view. And, of course, they also got a lot of their stuff from the Iroquois, the Five Tribes. But I'm the same way. Like, I already said it, that I thought Laura Loomer's disgusting, or like these other people on the right are disgusting. But if, like I said, if Biden was saying we need to revoke their citizenship and send them to a secret prison because we don't like what they say, I would be against that too, So like my principles are consistent regardless of which party's doing it. And I'd say that the threat to America is Donald Trump. Not somebody saying something that you don't, if we're having a free society, there's going to be a diversity of ideas. There's not just going to be one vision of America. And I would like to think that people listening to this who don't agree with me, that know me personally, and I know there's some, I'm not going to cut anybody off for what they think, but I do want people to know where I stand. And if they choose to cut me off based on that, so be it. But I would like to think they would not want me sent to some secret prison because I said something they disagree with. If they believe in freedom of speech. Then if they don't, they don't. Then, obviously I had a different view of what ideally this country is supposed to stand for. I know that we weren't perfect to begin with, but there were founding principles such as freedom of speech and the Constitution that I do appreciate, even if, there were other things like slavery and other things like that I didn't appreciate that we've improved upon the years. There's always, if we always went with, criticizing anything about America is bad, then, we wouldn't have civil rights movement. We wouldn't have abolition, Dissent has many times changed this country for the better. I have friends who aren't even that political that are citizens, born here, have an American accent. Like my one friend, he's American, but with like Puerto Rican descent. He was born, I forget where in New York, like Queens or Brooklyn. And his family's like from Puerto Rico, and actually Puerto Ricans are all U.S. citizens. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. He has the same like accent as me. Not that should make a difference, but I'm just saying, like, he was someone that wasn't like super political or afraid of this kind of stuff. But now he's a little freaked out that people that just like look like him or have Hispanic names like he does are being detained. And I know other people. I know some woman who's a friend of mine. She's not even Hispanic. She's like mixed race, like Filipino and some other things. But she's afraid now because they're targeting people that look like her. Because she looks Hispanic. And it's ICE. There was a video. I'm gonna post links to everything I'm talking about in the description, so you can look into this stuff yourself. One of the heads of ICE was talking about that ICE doesn't even need to have probable cause to detain someone. They just need to have a certain look. To me, this is just some kind of. I think this is they say this is about laws and all this and that, but it's about the changing demographics that I think there's people just don't like that this isn't a majority. This is becoming not a majority white country anymore. And I think when they say make America great again, like I tried to give the benefit of the doubt, but I think in a lot of ways that just means make America white again. And one thing I got to hand to people like Ann Coulter, even though I think she's disgusting, is at least she's honest about that. At least she says that. There's plenty of people that try to dance around that, like, oh no, he's not about race, he's not, but what is this? Because they're not just this isn't just, they're targeting people who came in the legal way, and they're targeting people who are citizens that just look different, or look foreign. And, I mean, jazz and blues was like all the African American community. Like, that's not American, that's American as fuck, man. I mean, Richie Valens was Chicano, Latino from one of the old greatest rockabilly stars. He died in that plane with Buddy Holly and the others. Like, he's the one that wrote La Bamba, or he wrote Oh Donna. Like, that's American as fuck. Like, I don't know, man. And even people that aren't from it, like immigrant, like those are human beings, and I've had more positive experiences with immigrants or people from other cultures than I've had negative, to be honest. Like, some of the best people I've met have been immigrants, and I've developed close friendships. Like, I used to live in a house
when I first moved here to South Orange that was all immigrants. And some of them sometimes had, they were international students basically, and every once in a while some of them had issues with their papers they needed to sort it out. But they were law-abiding people. They were good people. Like I've probably met more people that are citizens that have committed crimes, and actually statistically, I'm going to post this in the description of this, that you're actually undocumented or non-documented, statistically, you're more likely, a citizen is more likely to commit a crime than an immigrant. And yeah, sure, there's some immigrants that come here. There are violent criminals that come over, but it's like there's violent criminals that are citizens. So like, why are you making this a unique thing to immigrants? Just like there's wonderful people who are citizens and wonderful people who are immigrants, and there's terrible people in the other category. Like, that's the thing. Like, these are just human beings, and like every one of them is a unique, different soul. Like, you can't just paint them all in a brush. Like, oh, they're Mexican, they're this, they're humans. And I don't think people realize like how diverse Mexico is. Like, there's European, there's indigenous people. The president now is Jewish. Actually, there's Jews come in all shapes and sizes, and from all different backgrounds. There's also like Ethiopian Jews and all. And I think we never really lived in a post-racial society. I think it's just that now people are more comfortable being openly racist than they were before. And people used to also act like open racism only happens in the Deep South. The town I originally grew up in, New Providence, New Jersey, my sister said her friend was chased out of the school. She was African American, and they ended up suing the school. And there was also an Indian friend of hers that was bullied out of the school. And there was, my mother's Jewish, like by ethnicity, but we went to all kinds of different things like growing up. Like we weren't raised religiously Jewish. She probably sent us to more churches than she did synagogue, because like my sister went to the Presbyterian church. Like I don't think either of us fully believed in it, but I think like we went to a Unitarian church. We went to I don't remember going to synagogue as a kid. I think my sister said that when she went to the Presbyterian church, like like she asked, are my grandparents, and because like they were saying like how if you're not a Christian you go to hell, like this, she was asking like, are my grandparents in hell, are they gonna go to hell? And they said yeah, they're in hell because they're Jewish, and that kind of thing. And for a while the left was getting a little too politically correct and a little too because I think it's good to be sensitive and empathetic and understand people's different cultures. And I think I'm all about like bridging divides, and I think being an artist and like a creative type has been a big thing, because like I've always, because like being a creative, like a writer, musician, actor, I've always been able to connect with like creative people from all different cultures and backgrounds. And there's a lot of Latinos now in the arts that do like bands, art, and just different ones. I've interviewed different creative people from all different walks of life, and BSing with Sean Kay, and also with whatchamacallit. Oh, the new show, Let's Talk About the Neat Stuff, that I'm doing now. This show. I forgot the title of this show. So, like, it's always been hard for me to just, like, I just can't relate to it when people say, oh, they're all this way. Oh, it's one of them. It's like, but they are us, like. And I've heard people say similar things with fighting, like, or jujitsu, or different, like, that they. I have one friend, like, I know he was he's Caucasian, and recently, a few years ago, he was on a team that was all African American. He was the only white guy. He was on a football team, and I know they got along real well, and he became good friends with them. And through doing what you love, sometimes that's usually a way to bridge, to take down barriers, and you can connect with people from all different backgrounds if you have a similar thing you love. I know I was talking about music and the arts, but it's with all different things. But I did think that, like, I'm consistent about free speech and everything, and when people on the left were saying, let's shut this person down, let's shut that person down, I think that, like, I'm for freedom of speech for the right, too. Like, if this were reversed and, Biden were locking up everybody who supports Trump, like, I would be against that. Because my principles go beyond just, like, political affiliation. And I see a lot of the people who said they were all about the Constitution and everything not giving a shit about it now, when it's happening to people not like them, or people, though I have seen some people who were Latino and supported Trump are now like, oh, I thought he was just going to go after criminals, now he's going after all of us. But what I was going to say was, like, my ADHD, my mind jumps around. Sometimes it's hard to control that, but yes, there was a thing for a while with, like, too much political correctness and, like, kind of like this self-righteous, because, like, I don't think political correctness is necessarily bad. Like, it's not bad to be more empathetic and understanding of different people and cultures, but there was kind of, like, the snooty, types that were performative and, like, oh, you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't, and it got annoying, because, like, I think the left approached that shit wrong. It was, even though it was coming from a good place. But also, like, when these right-wing people speak, like, if somebody says something disgusting, like, I'm allowed to say you're a racist and you suck, and I'm allowed to not like someone because of what they say. That's not censorship. That's, like, they can say what you want. Like, Ann Coulter can say whatever she wants. I just think she's a disgusting human being. I'm allowed to say that. I'm allowed to call them out on their shit. So the freedom of speech goes both ways. But at the same time, it's like, I have one of my best friends. He's Taiwanese, and every once in a while we'll get into jokes like about like, I'll say a joke like about, like, a race joke, but it's like a fun between, like, a close friend that I've developed a connection with, and he'll say a joke, like, a couple times he said a Jew joke, like, and I, like, but we've reached that level of closeness where that's okay, because, like, we know each other and respect each other as human beings. But somebody who supports this bullshit, like racially profiling with ICE, or detaining people who look Hispanic, even if they're citizens, if somebody like that makes a joke then about, oh, I'm going to deport this Latina across the border, then I don't find that very fucking funny. Because I think that jokes that are, like, among friends, I think that depending on the context, the joke is just a joke, but then sometimes it could serve to dehumanize, too. If it's, like, if you just see them all as that stereotype, if you just see them all as, the Mexican lady on Family Guy that's just like, I clean. If you don't know them as individual people, if you haven't met, like, oh, the artist, she's from Mexico, or the this or that, or yet you don't know, then it could be like a dehumanization. But, like, me, if I make a Jewish joke, like, I know, like, not all Jews are that way. If I act like a Jewish stereotype, like, it's different if I do it. It's I like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think sometimes people are too uptight about humor, but I think sometimes it could also serve to dehumanize, because if you see them all as just like a monolith and all like, oh, they're just like that silly maid that was talking on Family Guy, then you're not going to have as much empathy for what's happening to them. You might laugh at that. That see, ha ha ha, they're getting deported, ha 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 ha, like that. Like, I'm just doing my douchebag laugh because I know there's douchebags who laugh at that stuff, like talking like, ha 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 ha, I don't have empathy, I'm so cool, ha 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 ha, but I don't want anyone to call me a racist. Then that's not as funny. You know this whole thing about detaining people who look a certain way, but who seem foreign, quote unquote? It's not new. It's a playbook this country has used before. And of course other countries have done this and that, but I'm focusing on this country, because this is where I live. Take World War II. After Pearl Harbor, 120,000 Japanese Americans, the majority of whom were U.S. citizens, were forcibly removed from their homes and sent to internment camps. Entire families, including babies and grandparents, stripped of everything and thrown behind barbed wire. Why? Not because they committed crimes, not because there was any evidence, but because they were Japanese. They were painted as traitors through official U.S. government propaganda. Films like Know Your Enemy, Japan, portrayed Japanese people as sneaky, animalistic, hive-minded, literally subhuman. Even Disney contributed to this effort with racist cartoons during the war. These weren't just cartoons, they were psychological weapons, meant to strip people of empathy for an entire group. What's sick is while Japanese Americans were in camps, their white neighbors looted their homes and took over their businesses. And decades later, the government admitted it had no basis. Ronald Reagan signed a formal apology in 1988 with the Civil Liberties Act, saying it was caused by race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. Sound familiar? The same strategy was used against African Americans long before and after slavery. During slavery, propaganda depicted black people as childlike, savage, lazy, or hypersexual. Anything that would justify stripping them of autonomy. They used scientific racism, like phrenology, to argue black people were biologically inferior. All of this was used to justify slavery and all other brutality used against African Americans. Because if you just see them this way, what's to say that, why would you have any empathy for them? The same thing, like if you view these immigrants that come in as just like freeloaders or, they're just people stealing your jobs, like why are you going to care about any violence towards them? That's why people laugh. Some people were laughing at these videos of ICE brutalizing these people who weren't violent at all. They were just, regular people looking for a better life, and they were brutalizing them. And that's the kind of thing that dehumanization does. Look at minstrel shows, white performers in blackface mocking black culture, painting them as buffoons or threats. This wasn't just entertainment, it was propaganda, softening the public to accept segregation, disenfranchisement, and state violence. Even films like Birth of a Nation in 1915, a blockbuster at the time, showed the KKK as heroes and black men as rapists and criminals. That movie directly inspired a resurgence of the Klan. That's how powerful propaganda can be. So when people just say it's just law and order or it's not about race, I call bullshit. Because we've seen this before. And history always starts the same way, with a stereotype, with fear, with dehumanization. And then it gets worse. Always. And speaking of law and order, the phrase law and order might sound neutral or even positive on the surface. After all, everyone wants safety and justice. But in the United States, it actually has a long racist history as a political code phrase used to justify harsh policing, mass incarceration, and systemic oppression of black communities and of other people of color. Michelle Alexandra's book, The New Jim Crow, lays out how, starting with in the 1960s and 1970s, politicians used
law and order rhetoric to appeal to white voters who were anxious about the civil rights movement and racial integration. Instead of openly admitting to racial bias, politicians framed their tough-on-crime stances as necessary to restore order in cities and neighborhoods. This language appealed to racial fears without explicitly mentioning race, a classic example of dog-whistle politics. This law and order focus fueled policies like the war on drugs, which disproportionately targeted black and brown communities. Despite similar drug use rates across races, people of color were arrested, convicted, and sentenced at dramatically higher rates. This created a new racial caste system that what Alexandra calls the new Jim Crow, where millions of black Americans are effectively locked out of society through mass incarceration, disenfranchisement, and economic exclusion. Historically, this mirrors older systems of racial control like slavery and Jim Crow segregation laws, just as black codes and vagrancy laws were designed to criminalize black life after emancipation. Modern law and order policies have functioned to criminalize and marginalize black communities, maintaining racial hierarchy under the guise of public safety. So when you hear law and order being touted as a rallying cry, especially in political campaigns or tough-on-crime rhetoric, it's important to recognize the underlying legacy. It's often a mask for racial control, not genuine justice. Now, I'm not one of those that's like, oh, we should abolish the police force altogether and have no police. Like, I'm not. I believe, like, things like community policing and body cams on police and stuff like that. I believe in, like, things to stop police brutality from happening, and community policing is basically, people from that community policing instead of outside people. People who are familiar with the demographics of the community, policing the areas where they are, and, knowing the people in the neighborhood, and instead of some outside person who may have certain biases that's going to view someone as a threat that isn't necessarily a threat. As somebody who... So that's community policing, and demilitarization too, are things I support. I'm not, let's get rid of the police. And so I just think that, a police that serves the people, not any kind of authoritarian or police that abuse their power.
But here's what's really disturbing. Another thing that disturbs me is the biggest ICE raids we're seeing now are in blue states, in places like California and New York, not in Texas or Florida or the red states. You'd expect tougher immigration enforcement. That tells me this isn't just about enforcing laws, this is about intimidation. It's about Trump using federal power to go after states and cities that disagree with him. It's political punishment, plain and simple. He's not targeting immigrant communities because he actually cares about crime or public safety. He's doing it to send a message. If you don't bend the knee, if you don't fall in line, I'll bring the full force of the federal government down on you. That's what a tyrant does. That's what authoritarian regimes do. They don't just silence dissent, they terrorize it. And Trump, on another thing, is Trump keeps talking about homegrown terrorists. Okay, let's talk about them. What about the guy who went on a shooting spree and targeted the Democratic lawmakers this year because of immigration? Yes, Vance Bolter. Boelter. Look him up. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. It's Bolter. Vance Bolter. That wasn't some outsider. It was a far-right, homegrown, who literally hunted down elected officials. What about Peyton Gendron in Buffalo, the guy who killed 10 black shoppers in 2022 and left behind a whole manifesto parroting white replacement theory? Or Dylan Roof, who murdered 9 black churchgoers in Charleston because he wanted to start a race war. That's homegrown terrorism. That's domestic extremism. But you don't see Trump calling that out, or at least if he does, he kind of just changes the topic quick and goes back to the radical left, or immigrants or anybody, any other. Instead, he's targeting Zoran Mamdani, a Muslim candidate who just won the Democratic primary for New York City mayor, labeling him a radical Islamist, a terrorist, and even an anti-Semitic threat. No proof, just bigotry. And get this, after his victory, CAIR, the organization CAIR, C-A-I-R, documented over 6,200 Islamophobic posts in one single day, including 127 threats. Figures like Trump Jr., Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Laura Loomer led the smear campaign. Of course she did. Laura Loomer, I mean, it's not like Mamdani did not say anything like, let's feed all Jewish people to alligators, like she said about Latinos. If he did, then I would be concerned. Okay, there's a New York City mayor who wanted, but he wouldn't have gotten elected in New York, and he wouldn't have had Jewish people supporting him. On NBC's Meet the Press, Mamdani said the slogan globalized Intifada. He clarified that Intifada in Arabic means uprising or struggle, not necessarily armed violence. It's a rallying cry for resistance, not an explicit call for terrorism. He was talking about he wanted people to advocate for Palestinian rights worldwide because he doesn't think the Palestinians are being treated fair and that they aren't being given the same rights or treated like equals. So, but I think the way he phrased it, he should have been more mindful of how that could be used as a slur against him or misinterpreted by some. But I don't think he meant any violence. He meant violence towards Jewish people. He didn't say anything like Laura Loomer said. He didn't say, let's feed Jews to alligators. So I'd say he's better than Trump's circle. But he also said on Meet the Press, he said that he doubled down that's not his message. The globalized Intifada is not the language he uses. He emphasized that the focus is on protecting Jewish New Yorkers, expanding anti-hate crime funding, and advancing universal human rights. So, and there's plenty of Jews that back him. One of the main Jewish leaders, Brad Lander, the Jewish NYC comptroller and noted progressive Zionist, cross-endorsed Mamdani, saying he personally disliked the global Intifada phrasing, but believed Mamdani would protect Jewish New Yorkers. The rabbis from JFREJ, Jewish for Racial and Economic Justice, also publicly endorsed him, saying his platform reflected the Jewish call for justice. And there was even a grassroots Jews for Zoran effort led by Jewish campaign professionals. So there are Jewish progressives in New York, and actually no Jews and Jewish New Yorkers who support him. And actually he won for a lot of the reasons Trump won, at least in his first election. He won... a lot of the reasons Trump won the first election is because he spoke to working people. He spoke to everyday people. Like, he conversed with them and tried to address their needs, and he was a populist, and Mamdani was a populist from the left. Cuomo did not speak to working people, and Cuomo is a much worse person than him, at least from what I looked at. Like, Cuomo sexually assaulted women, and I haven't seen anything on Mamdani like that. The worst I've seen about Mamdani is he said that that global Intifada statement, and he also another thing was that he made a music video with some like old woman and like did a rap video. Like, okay, I mean, I actually thought that was pretty cool, but like I'm not the expert on this guy, but I know that a lot of the smears are just coming from a place of racism, not because they care about anti-Semitism or any of that. It's just because he's the scary brown guy that got elected. But meanwhile, these people say they care about anti-Semitism, but meanwhile, Trump downplayed neo-Nazis marching in Charlottesville who chanted, "Jews will not replace us." This was during his first term as president. I forget the exact year. He refused to call out their hate as overtly as he should have. To be fair, the clip where he said they're very fine people was edited by the media. He did not say the Nazis were very fine people. He did say the Nazis were bad. He said there were very fine, but there were also very fine people on both sides. That's exactly what he said when I looked at the full clip. Because as much as I hate Trump, I want to be honest with my criticism of him. I don't want to take him out of context and say something he didn't say. I'm just going by what he exactly said. So he didn't say that the Nazis were very fine people, but he did kind of change the subject quickly and make it like, okay, but they're not the real problem. Antifa and the radical left, they're the bad ones. He kind of downplayed. He didn't condemn it as fiercely as he should have. He pivoted back to Antifa and the radical left, you know. But even worse, you know, I think that a lot of this anti-Semitism is something to worry about, and you got people like Dan Bilzerian, who I think that anybody who cares about like Palestinian rights or is only calling for like justice and that kind of thing, I think they should distance themselves from people like Dan Bilzerian, because he's actually going on and saying like Nazi like propaganda. Sure, he says the right things about Palestinians having equal rights and some of the abuses of the current Israeli government, who said that, you know, there's people like Smotrich just said that they want to that have publicly said that they want to depopulate Gaza and force everybody out, and they want Gaza to be part of greater Israel. If you want to look more into this, like, this is a whole other topic to get into. I did an episode with activist Sam Stein, who's a Jewish activist in Israel. He's lived among Palestinians, and he lived in the West Bank, and he endured several settler attacks with them. I think, and I also did an interview with Najla Saeed, who's a Palestinian playwright and author, and she's also the daughter of a famous Palestinian intellectual, Edward Said, and they were actually a Christian Palestinian family and a wealthier family. That's why they were able to get out during the Nakba in the 1948. But I'm mentioning the Palestinian Christian because I think I kind of want to challenge some of those biases people have, that they don't, like, you don't, this isn't really about Muslims versus Jews. This is more of a racial and territorial conflict. Because the secular PLO, this was happening when the secular PLO was the Palestinian side and everything. But I'm not going to go into all that now, because that's like a whole other topic, and I've already gone on pretty long. But I like, anti-Semitism is important. I think that you have the right to be an anti-Semite. You have the right to be a bigot. So I don't know, like, cracking down on, like, even if there were anti-Semites, unless it's somebody actually advocating violence towards Jews, I would argue what fucking Laura Loomer said was advocating violence towards Latinos. So if we're going to go that route, we should hold Laura Loomer accountable too. But why is it okay for people in our Congress to say they want to turn Gaza into a parking lot? Is it okay to advocate violence towards Palestinians based on their race? You know, but I think that's why the fact that he's not saying that with the people who said Jews will not replace us shows me that this is for silencing dissent against Israel, not about any kind of anti-Semitism. You have to differentiate the state of Israel and the government of Israel with Jews. I think that's very dangerous to equate the two. And I think it's dangerous when Netanyahu says we're acting on behalf of the Jews, because that promotes anti-Semitism. You know, they're a government, they're their own entity, and no, they don't speak for all Jewish people. There are plenty of Jews that oppose what the Israeli government is doing right now, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that not wanting everybody in Gaza to be killed and starved to death, like, there's Palestinian Americans too. Like, sure, we have Jewish people here with relatives in Israel, but we also have Palestinian Americans. Like, my one friend, she's actually converted to Christianity. I think I don't know if I think her relatives are Muslim though. But, like, the people in Gaza are only in Gaza because they were forced out of other areas, and now they're stuck as refugees in Gaza with no way to get out. Or it's very difficult to get out, at least. And, you know, 5 of her cousins were killed that had no connection to any radical group or anything. They were just innocent civilians there. So, and there was recently a Palestinian American killed by radical Israeli settlers in the West Bank too. So,
are all our citizens equal? Do all of their lives and their families matter? Or are certain ones more important than others? I'd like to think the former is the truth, that they all matter equally. But I've never been to that region, so that's why I recommend that you check out my conversation with Sam Stein for a more in-depth discussion on that. I'll put a link to that in the description, and also my discussion with Najla Saeed. And they spoke from more personal experience than I did. But all right, I know this was a long one, but I needed to say it, and if you've been listening, I hope you see where I'm coming from. This isn't just about one politician or one policy. It's about a pattern where people in power stoke fear, stereotype entire communities, and try to divide us so we don't see who's really pulling the strings. When they can convince you that the problem is some immigrant working a minimum wage job or a protester standing up for human rights, you're not looking at the CEOs cutting wages or the politicians gutting healthcare. We've seen this before in history. We're seeing it again now. But I still believe in pushing back, with truth, with clarity, and with honesty. I'm not going to lie to make people comfortable. I'd rather speak up and risk backlash than stay silent while people suffer. If any of this challenged you or made you think, good. That's the point. And if it resonated with you, you're not alone. There are many people out there fighting for justice, for dignity, and for something better. You don't have to agree with everything I say. But if you've ever been told this is just about law and order, I'd ask you to look closer, because what it really looks like is about control. And once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. Anyway, I'm Kneese. This is Let's Talk About the Deep Stuff. We'll catch you next time.